They say the wind never stops howling in the Carpathians, not even in the dead of night. It weaves through the fir trees like a mourning widow, brushing past the ancient stones of Lactus Castle, where once lived a woman whose name still makes the devout cross themselves in secret. Elizabeth Báthory, the Blood Countess, the monster in lace and velvet. At the age of 4, she watched a thief sewn into the belly of a dead horse. Their union was not of love, but of empires. The wedding was held in the dead of winter. The sky wept ice. Others claimed she was the devil's widow. One thing is certain: after she arrived, Elizabeth was never the same. Her eyes grew deeper, as if a storm had settled behind them. She rarely left her chambers during the day. At night, screams were heard, thin, high-pitched, like the keening of rabbits being gutted. The Countess watched the bead of blood rise, crimson and defiant. She struck the girl not out of anger, but curiosity. The blood spattered across her skin. And in that moment, something unholy bloomed within her. She stared at the droplets. Her cheeks flushed, her heart thundered. She whispered warmth. Yet no funerals were held, no bodies buried. Elizabeth wore a black dress because, she said, white reminded her of snow, and snow reminded her of burial shrouds. Her skin, porcelain, cold, was untouched by time. Her beauty was a blade, sharp, impossible, and dangerous. Visitors came and went, dazzled by her elegance, unsettled by her stillness. Servants changed frequently, always young, always beautiful, and always disappearing. Her husband, a man of war, left her alone for months at a time. Her bones ached. The illusion of immortality was cracking, and with it, her mind. In his absence, the castle grew quiet. And strange, they come, she writes each night. They ask me why I took what was not mine. I tell them beauty is not theft. But they laugh. His screams echoed into her dreams for years. At 7, she corrected her Latin tutors when they misquoted Cicero. Girls were brought in from the villages under promise of work, education, safety, and yet Elizabeth thrived. No one dared confront her. She was a widow now, Prince, died of illness, though some say he was poisoned. Her wealth grew, her hunger grew. The reckoning, slow as it was, had begun to crawl toward her like a dog that smells rot. They never returned. The villagers began to murmur. The priests refused to visit. The servants who knew too much vanished into the forests. Those who remained said nothing, for they feared what they might summon. Her maids, loyal or terrified or both, would pour the blood with reverence. And Elizabeth would smile, quiet, languid smile, like a painting come to life. She believed it preserved her beauty. She believed it preserved her soul. At 10, she fainted upon seeing a peasant boy beaten for stealing an apple, not from pity, but from how strangely thrilled she felt, that tremble in her spine. She would chase it for the rest of her life. But what if the monster was a mirror? Let us begin not with death, but with silence. The kind that clings to the air just before a scream. It was the year 1560, and Elizabeth was born under a sky that glowed like wet ink, as if God himself had spilled a curse upon the land. Her bloodline was impeccable, descendant of warlords, kings, and madmen. She kept books bound in lambskin, written in archaic tongues. She brewed potions to calm her nerves, or so she claimed, but the servants whispered of things far darker, of candles that burned blue. Voices heard in the walls of animals sacrificed under moonlight. And then came Anna d'Arvulia. Her cousin was the Prince of Transylvania, her uncle a scholar of poisons. Her nursemaid whispered ancient prayers in a tongue no longer spoken. And in her cradle, swaddled in silks, she twitched with night terrors that no child should know. From the beginning, Elizabeth was not like other girls. At 13, she was promised to Firenze nobleman famed more for the sharpness of his sword than the warmth of his smile. Elizabeth was drawn to alchemy, herbalism, and the old ways. No one knows where Anna came from. Some said she was a midwife turned witch. By the time Elizabeth turned 30, she had not aged a day. It was a seamstress, barely 15, who was the first to bleed. The story goes that she pricked Elizabeth by accident while adjusting a hemline. Anna saw the change immediately, and she fed it. You must understand, this was a time of superstition and plague, of holy wars and madness disguised as piety. Women were burned for less than a glance, and her methods became art. She no longer hid the blood. She bathed in it, or so they say. In the great stone tub beneath her castle, lit by dozens of flickering candles, she would recline as the crimson waters lapped against her pale skin. But what if she believed it out of desperation? Because age was creeping in. The lines beneath her eyes deepened. Her hair, once raven black, began to gray. There is a letter, possibly forged, possibly not written in her own hand, where she speaks of voices in the dark, of shadows that whisper promises, of a mirror that shows not her reflection, but her corpse. By now, over 100 girls had vanished. No one dared act, not yet. But the seeds of her downfall were already sown in the blood-drenched soil of Lactus. Elizabeth, so composed, so cold, so brilliant, could not see it coming. She was too busy chasing eternity, in the veins of the innocent. Winter came early the year the whispers turned to screams. Tss. The first to speak was a priest, old, half-blind, forgotten by court and crown alike. She lived just long enough to mouth a name. He'd buried too many girls in unmarked graves, bodies handed to him at night, wrapped in burlap, their faces frozen mid-scream. He said nothing for years, until he found one still warm. Her throat had been crushed, but her fingers still twitched. Villagers who approached the castle were turned away at sword point. A maid who escaped swore under oath that she saw girls strung upside down from the rafters, their blood collected in bowls of black iron. Some were beaten, others burned with tongs, and some stitched open, still breathing. That name Elizabeth in the tongue of the nobles passed from the old priest's lips like a curse, and once it escaped, it refused to die. In 1609, the stories had multiplied like wolves in snow. Girls found drained of blood, their bodies folded like parchment. Still, no one acted. Why? She wrote poetry. She donated to churches. She once nursed the plague-ridden poor in public, though some claim she did it only to study the color of infected blood. Because Elizabeth was not just a noblewoman, she was a fortress. She had land, wealth, and a web of cousins, godfathers, and bishops who owed her favors or feared her wrath. But behind those cold eyes, something had snapped. A young guard who refused to bring in more village girls was found impaled on the castle gate, a crude crown of rose thorns nailed to his skull. She no longer hunted for youth. She hunted for silence. Anyone who suspected her vanished. Servants who spoke out were mutilated and hung as warnings. If Elizabeth was guilty, truly guilty, her lands could be seized, her power broken, and his debts forgiven. A loyal sword of the crown, and once a childhood friend of Elizabeth herself, she was untouchable. Until she made a single mistake. She killed a noble girl. Catalin Banashki, the daughter of a minor lord, was promised education under the Countess's guidance, a token of respect between houses. She arrived at Lactus smiling. She never left. They spoke of iron maidens, of sewing needles pushed into lips and eyelids, of girls forced to eat the flesh of others. Some testimonies were so horrific that even the scribes refused to write them. Within weeks, her father sent men to investigate. They were turned away. A letter was sent. No answer. A second messenger disappeared. The third came back with bruises and trembling lips. "She is gone," was all he could say. Elizabeth's mask began to crumble. Word reached the Habsburg court. One was missing an arm. Another had been beaten until her skull collapsed. A third still breathed barely. Her eyes wide open, her tongue torn out. And in the corner of the room, kneeling beside a copper basin full of fresh blood, stood Elizabeth. And this time, they listened. She looked at him as one might look at a servant arriving late. King Matthias II, Holy Roman Emperor and ever in debt to the estate, saw an opportunity. So he sent a man, Gyurgy Palatine of Hungary. He did not come with torches. He came with parchment, with spies, with patience. For weeks, collected testimonies from villagers, priests, escaped maids, even a gravedigger who claimed to bury so many girls. I stopped counting at 100. But still waited. He wanted proof. He wanted blood on her hands. And on the night of December 29th, 1610, he got it. He arrived unannounced, with soldiers and torches, under cover of darkness. What he found would become legend. In the cold stone corridors of Lactus Castle, they discovered 4 dead girls, laid out on the floor like broken dolls, calm, unflinching, as if she had merely been washing her hands. When entered, she did not scream, she did not run. Early, she whispered. In the hidden cellars they found chains bolted to the walls, rusted tools slick with dark residue, and journals, hundreds of pages. Meticulously written in Elizabeth's hand. Not a mad cackle, not a scream of the damned, but a quiet, broken thing, like the last breath of a caged bird. As men scoured the castle for 2 days. Names, ages, dates. One had her fingers torn out with hot iron tongs before being burned alive. Their tongues silenced the Countess's voice forever. Elizabeth, meanwhile, was sentenced to a punishment reserved for the untouchable, imprisonment without trial. The windows were sealed, the doors removed. Only a single slit remained, through which servants passed scraps of food and a bucket for waste. No light, no books, no mirrors. She whispered to ghosts, or perhaps to herself. Some nights, villagers claimed they heard her singing lullabies in a language long dead. Others said she laughed endlessly, hollow lie until even the wolves fled the hills. No verdict, no last words. They bricked her into a room in Lactis Castle, her own tower, now a tomb, just stone. Some say she was framed, that the crown sought her land and invented her sins. But others say the castle still weeps, that the air in her chamber is cold, even in summer, that blood still seeps between the cracks in the stone, and that if you whisper her name in the dark, she whispers back. The stones of Lactis Castle are silent now. Moss creeps along the mortar. Ivy coils like veins. The great hall where noblemen once feasted lies in ruin, open to the sky. The tower where Elizabeth was entombed has crumbled, and yet tourists still come, whispering, listening, searching for something that was never meant to be found. Because Elizabeth did not vanish with death, she transformed. In poems, she was likened to Lilith, the devourer of children. Priests warned their flocks. Beauty is a temptation, and temptation wears a red dress. Mothers in Eastern Europe, for centuries, still whispered, "Be good, or the Countess will take you in your sleep." From woman to myth, from myth to monster, and from monster to immortal. Her story bled into legend almost instantly. In taverns, they called her the woman who drank virgins. But over time, a strange thing happened. The line between fact and fiction blurred. The testimonies gathered under torture. No corpse of 600 girls was ever confirmed. No blood-filled bathtub found. Was she truly guilty? Or was she the victim of a conspiracy, an inconvenient woman, too powerful, too educated, too uncontrollable for a world ruled by men? Historians still argue. The court documents were written by men who wanted her land, and yet the myth persists. Because myth, unlike fact, satisfies something deeper. In the 19th, she was folded into the swirling cape of Count Dracula. Bram Stoker never named her, but her echo is in every word, every drop of blood on Castle Stone, every cold immortal who walks alone through eternity, athirst. That they only live in pages, in dreams, in candlelit tales, to frighten children. In the 18th century, tales of Elizabeth inspired writers of Gothic horror. In film, she is a queen of death-veiled, seductive, blood-stained. In games, she returns again and again. A villain, a vampire, a sorceress, bathing in innocence. In whispers, she is called the female Dracula. But Dracula was fiction. Elizabeth was real. Listen closely, and that is what makes her terrifying. Because deep down, we want to believe that monsters aren't real. But Elizabeth reminds us. Sometimes monsters wear silk. Sometimes they walk among nobles. Sometimes they wear a human face. And sometimes they are women the world refused to understand. So if you walk the ruins of Lactus at dusk, and the mist begins to rise through the trees, and the wind carries the scent of iron and roses, not all ghosts scream. Some of them sing, and one of them still believes that beauty is worth the blood.